So, hi guys, welcome to Yoga for Normal People. I am feeling a little bit like I want to move today, and a little bit like my hips and backs of my legs have actually been really tight. Funny enough, I know some of you guys mentioned that you're feeling the same way, but I just got back from a quick 2 mile walk to take the dog to doggy daycare today, and so my legs are a little bit warmed up. So we're gonna do some back of the leg, outer hip, inner hip, lower body work today. You'll need a pair of blocks and a blanket if you like. I use a blanket to sit on. So the first thing we're actually going to do is instead of starting sitting, let's start just kind of standing up. And what I'd like you to do is take your feet wider than your hips and point your toes forward. So instead of turning toes out towards the edges, you're going to turn toes forward towards the front of your mat. And then you're just going to take your hands to your hips. And all I'd like you to do is just start to bend into the left knee and then bend into the right. So I am mirroring you guys today. So we're just going to start by warming up the legs a little bit. Just start by bending those knees left and right. And you're going to send your hips back. So if I'm standing here and I bend left and bend right, you'll notice my hips go back. So my knee isn't really jutting out over the ball of my foot. I'm just kind of almost like you're on a skateboard or a surfboard and you're just kind of shifting your weight left and right. So just kind of waking up the knees, the legs, the hamstrings, the glutes. And as you do this, just start to breathe a little bit. So you may start to notice that your breath rises, that your heartbeat rises a little bit just with this little gentle movement. Not a big deal. And we're going to do 2 more on each side. So here's 1 and 1 and 2 and 2. And then go ahead and come back up to stand. Step your feet back together. And what I'd like you to do is just start to tap the heels. So any kind of frustration or tension that you're feeling in your body, what I'd like you to do is just bounce. So you're just kind of pushing that frustration or that energy down into the floor. You'll feel this in the backs of your calves. Again, you'll feel your heart rate start to rise just a little bit. And if you'd like, just start to get your arms involved. Just kind of shake it out. And if you like, start to take a deep breath and make an audible exhale. So it's going to be something like this. Just kind of shaking it out, tapping those heels. And this may feel a little bit strange for yoga, but we're just kind of moving some energy today. Since it is getting to be cold across the country, we've got another big cold wave coming. This is warming the body right now. So we're bringing the energy up, heating the body, and moving the energy both down through our feet, just kind of tapping out that any kind of excess anxiety, frustration, whatever you may be feeling right now. And you can swing your arms if you like. You can drop your ears from left to right. Just kind of letting it all move. And then go ahead and just for a moment, come back to land. Take your feet directly under your hips. Place one hand on your belly and one hand on your heart. And just notice what the effect of that movement has been for you, just for this moment. Maybe close your eyes. Maybe just start to notice what the weather's like inside, what that interior monologue might be doing. And take another breath out. And from here, go ahead and just come back into your all fours. We're going to tuck our toes, lift our hips, come into a downward facing dog. And in that downward dog, just start to pedal out the feet. Let the heels drop. Maybe your feet squeak like mine on the mat. Just kind of shifting hips left and right. And breathe however you'd like to breathe. There's no sort of right or wrong way here. And then from here, go ahead and find a stable down dog. You can separate your feet and press actively down into the palms. Let that head hang heavy in between the shoulders. See if you can kind of bounce the heels a little bit just to give a little bit of stretch into the calves, into the backs of the thighs. And then from here, find some steadiness. And what I'd like you to do is imagine being drawn down into the floor by your heels while at the same time feeling a lift of the pelvis towards the sky. So really it's going to be like pubic bone towards the sky, upper inner thighs back and apart. This will deepen the stretch in the back of the thighs. Take an inhale here. And then from here, what I'd like you to do is shift your weight over into the right foot. Inhale to lift the left. And exhale, step that left foot in between your hands at the top of your mat. Lower that back knee. Take your hands to those blocks at the top of your mat. And maybe if you're like me and you didn't have enough space, scooch that left foot forward just a little bit. And then from here, take those blocks out towards your toes so that they're in front of your foot. And what you're going to do is just start to bend that left knee, let the hips sink, and then straighten that left knee. And your toes can stay down on the mat if you like. If you choose to keep them down on the mat, you're working some of that extension and flexion in the front of the foot, which is really kind of good because in modern days, we tend to lose that movement. But if your toes don't stay down on the mat, totally okay. You can always let those toes come up. So those blocks are there just to give a little stability, give you a little bit of help. But if you don't feel like you need them, you can take your fingertips down or your palms. Now I have short arms and my legs are longer, so I like the blocks. I'm going to keep those. So we'll do 2 more of those. And then go ahead and come back into the bent front knee, walk those blocks out, frame that front foot, tuck your back toes, lift your back knee, and then step back into a downward facing dog. And once again, just pedal out the feet. And just notice, just for a moment, come into a stillness and notice if maybe your left heel drops a little bit closer to the mat. Mine kind of does. It's very small, but it's noticeable. I also feel a little bit more warmth on that side. So here, once again, see if you can imagine that your heels are dropping towards the floor and your pelvis is being lifted towards the sky. So upper inner thighs, back and apart. Press down actively into the hands. And then you're going to ground down into your left foot. Lift your right towards the sky. And then step that foot in between your hands at the top of your mat. Drop your back knee. Take your hands back to those blocks. And if you need it, just make whatever adjustments you need either in the knee padding or in moving that right foot forward slightly. And then once you've moved that right foot forward slightly, go ahead and walk your blocks out towards your toe tips. And we're just going to start to sink forward. Let the hips come forward and then stretch back. Again, you can choose to keep those right toes on the floor if that feels right in your body. If it doesn't, let them come off the floor. And I'm tucking my left toes in the back just for a little bit more stability. If you want, you can bring the top of your foot to the mat, just depending on how you're feeling. Apparently there is something in my house that is making me sneezy today. So forgive the runny nose. I'm sure it's frustrating. I'll try not to sniffle too much, but I don't know what it is. I think it's because it's been wet here. And just kind of move in whatever shape feels good. Your hips don't have to go straight back. They can kind of roll around a little bit. Just whatever feels good. We'll do 2 more of those. Just breathing however you'd like to breathe. If you'd like to return to that hissing breath and that feels good, do it. And then go ahead and take your hands down off the blocks, frame that front foot, tuck your back toes, lift your back knee, and step back, downward facing dog. Now, as you hang out in your downward facing dog, just notice if your heels feel a little bit more even in that space, if they feel a little bit more like they're evenly reaching towards the floor. Now, in my case, my heels are not on the floor. It doesn't mean that you're a bad yogi or that you have failed at enlightenment here. It just means that your body is tight, and that's okay. And all of us have different body shapes. All of us have different bone shapes, which means that in some cases, no matter how much you stretch, no matter how much you meditate, you're never going to get there, and that's okay. Go ahead and take one more breath. And exhale. Let it go. And then from here, we're going to go ahead and come down to our shins just for a moment. And give our hands, give our wrists a little break. What I'd like you to do is interlace the fingers behind your low back. So you can grip whichever way. Usually you go for the dominant way. I go with my right thumb or my left thumb underneath. And then from here, just drag your knuckles towards your toe tips and lift your heart. So opening the chest. Maybe your gaze lifts. Take a moment. And then exhale, bend your elbows. And this time you can take your hands to your hips. Draw your elbows back in space. And once again, lift your head, lift your heart. So almost like someone's tugging your elbows towards one another behind you. And then from here, go ahead and release. Turn your palms towards the ceiling. Rest your hands on your thighs and just notice for a moment. Notice what it feels like to allow compression to happen into your legs. Notice what happens in the fronts of your shins. Notice if you feel any of that same kind of tingly energy that we felt maybe at the beginning of class, that kind of like energy, electricity, like you want to move kind of feeling. But instead of sort of giving into it just for a moment, just notice if that energy has any kind of messages, any notes for you. Like, hey, we need more of this, or hey, we need less of that. It's just a way that our bodies communicate with our minds and our nervous system. Sometimes it takes a moment of slowing down to just kind of check in. And then from here, go ahead and just open your eyes if they're closed. And we're going to come back into all fours. And here, what I'd like you to do is if you are on a blanket, go ahead and step that blanket out from under you. We're going to come back into our downward facing dog. Tuck your toes, lift your hips. And here you are, back in that downward dog shape. And here, see if you can kind of allow the chest to come more towards the floor. Press down into the palms. And maybe lift the pelvis just a little bit more. So almost like you're trying to point your pubic bone towards the juncture of the ceiling and the wall behind you. Take a deep breath in. And then on your next inhale, you're going to take that left leg and reach it up towards the sky. And then on your next inhale, what I'd like you to do is shift forward, draw that knee in towards your chest and step it in between your hands at the top of your mat. Take those blocks, place them on either side of that front foot, press down into those blocks, and if you need to kind of scooch that front foot forward a little bit just so you feel a little bit more stable, or widen it out left to right, feel free to do that. And then from here, what I'd like you to do is go ahead and press down into both feet, and you're just going to activate. So actively draw the heel of your front foot towards the toes of your back. You'll feel your legs turn on. Take an inhale here. And then on your exhale, ground down into that right hand, sweep that left arm up, open up towards the side. And see if you can still continue to activate from the front of that heel to the toes in the back. Take an inhale here. And an exhale. Go ahead and bring that left hand back down. And then straighten that front leg. And if you'd like, step that back leg in just a little bit and slightly wider so that you're on a pair of railroad tracks instead of being on a balance beam. Get those blocks set up underneath your hands. Take your left hand, tuck it into your left hip, draw that left hip back in space. That front leg is as straight as you like. You can keep a little bend in it, but we are going to add a little bit here. So what I'd like you to do is you're going to start to bend and straighten that right knee, so the back knee, keeping that front knee relatively straight. So again, just doing a little bit of dynamic stretch. Breathing as you like. And you can just press down into the ball mound of your back foot, or you can try to take that full foot down and do a smaller bend and straight. It's a lot harder because the Achilles tendon tends to want to restrict that movement, but just give it a try. We'll do 2 more of those sort of dynamic bending and straightening. There's 1 and 2. And then take those blocks out from underneath your hands, bend your front knee, frame your front foot, step back, downward facing dog. And here in your downward dog, just kind of notice what's happening in the legs. Notice what's happening in the backs of the legs. Take a breath. And then on your next inhale, you're going to sweep that right leg towards the sky. And exhale, bend that right knee. Draw that right foot in between your hands, the top of your mat. And then find your blocks once again. Again, I'm staying on high blocks today. It just feels a little better in my body because my hamstrings are super tight. And what I'd like you to do is bend deeply into that front knee. Press down into both feet first. And then actively draw your feet towards one another. So you'll feel your legs turn on. You'll especially feel the front of your left hip flexor turn on. That's where I feel it. And then you're going to ground down into that left hand. Sweep that right arm towards the sky and twist. Keep drawing those heels towards those toes. And then exhale. Take that right hand back down. And you're going to press back to straighten that front leg. And here, if you'd like, go ahead and step that back leg in and slightly wider so that you're more on railroad tracks than you are on a balance beam. And from here, we're going to do that same bending and straightening. Make sure your blocks are nice and stable underneath your hands. And you're just going to bend and straighten that back knee. So you may not feel this on one side as much as you do on the other. For me, I feel it more on the first side than I do on this side. But just depends on kind of your gait or what you've been doing or, what you've been up to in your life and how your body's responding to that. And again, if you like, you can always try and do a little bit of that bend and straightening with the heel more towards the ground. But if that doesn't work, go ahead and just take the heel up and press into the ball of the back foot. So you're just kind of almost like you're drawing a line forward and back on the floor with your heart. If you imagine that there was a laser beam shining out of your heart. We'll do 2 more of those. And then find a little bit of stillness. Take your right hand to your right hip and just tuck that right hip back in space. So you're almost like kind of just giving yourself a physical adjustment here. And find a little stillness just for a moment, keeping that right hip back in space. Reaching the soles of the feet towards the floor. And then go ahead and take a bend into that front knee. Take those blocks out from under your hands. Plant your hands, step back. Downward facing dog once again. Shake your head. Maybe pedal out your feet. And then from here, bend your knees. Look between your hands. Take a walk on up to the top of your mat. Inhale to halfway lift. Hands can come to shins, or if you like those blocks, you can take your hands on those blocks. And then exhale to fold. And then inhale, sweep the arms up and overhead. And exhale, hands come down to heart center. And come into a form of an easy seat for you, whatever that feels like. If you feel like you need to shake out your legs, feel free to shake out your legs. If you feel like you need a little counter stretch for your low back, feel free to do that too. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come into one final pose before moving into Savasana. So I'd like you to take your blanket and you're just going to roll it up towards the fringe end. So you're making a nice little blanket roll. And yours may be bigger or smaller than mine. Totally okay. You're going to place that behind you so that when you lie down, your upper back and shoulders come to rest on it. We're going to do a little heart opening here. So go ahead and plant both feet on the mat. Scoot your rear end slightly forward. Maybe look back. And you're looking to kind of get that roll right along sort of what would be where a bra strap might go. And then once you have that roll in the right spot, you're going to just drop your elbows so they come into Cactus Pose and let your knees knock towards one another. Let your head rest back on the mat. Your throat will feel open, so there'll be a distance between your chin and your sternum. And see if you can kind of tuck your shoulder blades in towards your spine and let the heart open towards the sky. You can kind of hear the change in my voice. If it feels good in your back or in your hips, you can take both legs out long. Let the feet kind of flop out towards the sides. Take a few breaths. And once you've taken those few breaths, slowly begin to bend your knees, point your knees towards the sky. And you're just going to roll off to left or right and roll off that blanket. You can slide it off to the left or right. And then come back down onto your backs. Make sure you take your blocks with you just so that they're kind of close. Once you come down onto your back, go ahead and point your knees towards the sky. Feet are planted. You're going to walk your feet in closer to your hips. Press down into your feet. Grab that block and put it on its second setting. And then lift it up underneath the pelvis so that you're in a supported bridge pose. And here, if you'd like, you can just start to shift the knees left and right just a little. So you're rolling the back of the pelvis on that block, and you're kind of opening up the front of the belly, hip flexors, deep psoas, belly. Just take a few breaths. And then when you're ready, ground down into your feet, lift your hips, place that block off to the left or right, and go ahead and find your Savasana. So whatever shape that is, if you'd like to use that blanket roll as a support underneath your head or underneath your knees, feel free to make whatever adjustments you feel like you need. And as you settle into your Savasana, your shape, maybe just gently close your eyes. Maybe just start to notice where your body is connected to the earth, connected to the ground. Notice how your breath pours out. And as you rest, see if you can return to that idea of spaciousness, finding a place either in your body or even imagining a layer outside of your body that's taking up space on the mat. So start to notice the sensation of your skin. And then just see if you can send your awareness just outside your skin. That energy that radiates out from where you are. Notice if it feels warm or tingly. Notice if there's a color to it. Notice if it changes with your breath or it changes with your heartbeat. And then when you're ready, without drawing your awareness away from sort of that expansive energy, start to deepen your breath. Begin to invite waves of movement into your body. Wiggle your fingers, your toes. Maybe start to roll your head from left to right and take a nice, long, deep, good morning stretch. And then when you're ready, just roll over to one side or the other. And take a pause. And then roll your shoulders more towards the earth and press down to sit up and find an easy seat, whatever shape that may be. And once you've found your easy seat, go ahead and take your hands to heart center. And now, just for a moment, see if you can find that midline energy, that sense of sort of energy moving from where you connect on the ground up through the crown of your head. It's not really through your spine, it's sort of through the middle of your body, and it's very fluid. Think of it like the way a willow tree moves in the wind. It's flexible and centered and radiant. Gently lower your head towards your heart. All the love and light in me bows to and honors all of the love and light in each one of you. Namaste.